What's up guys, my name is Ace, and for the Halloween event for Modern Warfare, we have a brand new mode that they added called Onslaughter, and this is the mode where both teams are fighting to capture a Juggernaut package, and then they have to escort that Juggernaut to the enemy team's spawn. So in this mode, it's obviously very important to know the most effective ways for killing an enemy Juggernaut, because if the enemy team manages to capture that Juggernaut, you have to try and take them down before they reach your spawn. So in today's video, we're going to be doing sort of a part 2 to the fastest way to kill a Juggernaut. I did a video like this many months ago, and since then they've added a ton of weapons, they've changed a lot of the balancing, so the list is actually completely different now than it used to be. And I thought it would be a great idea to cover this now that we have this new Juggernaut-based mode available. So let's start this off with a bit of a recap from what we learned in the first video I made, like I said, a long time ago, but this still applies today. First up, headshots definitely help when shooting a Juggernaut if you're using a gun. So whenever viable, you want to try and hit those headshots in order to maximize the amount of damage you're dealing. Also, if you're using a gun, FMJ is another thing that will help you a little bit at least. It doesn't help you by a ton, it doesn't like cut the number of shots in half or anything, but it does give you a bit of a boost when taking out a Juggernaut, so whenever possible, if you are creating a class that's designed to take out Juggernauts, put FMJ on there. And it's kind of a similar story with stopping power. Stopping power helps a little bit, not by a large degree, but every little bit counts, and therefore using stopping power isn't a bad idea as well. Then when it comes to lethal equipment like Semtexes, Molotovs, Thermites and stuff, these aren't really as good as you think they might be. Of course, they will take a little bit of a chunk of their health away, and if you've got the opportunity, of course, throw your equipment at them. But I would just say don't put yourself at any sort of unnecessary risk in order to stick that Thermite onto the Juggernaut, because it doesn't really help that much compared to just shooting it with a lot of the guns. Especially some of the setups I'm going to be sharing in this video that will allow you to kill a Juggernaut in about 2 seconds or less. Also, when it comes to launchers like an RPG, for instance, yes, it does take a bit of a chunk of their health away, and it's helpful to the team. If everybody's shooting launchers at the Juggernaut, yeah, you're going to take them down pretty quickly. But as a solo player at least, launchers simply aren't the best way for taking out a Juggernaut. And finally, with sniper rifles, assuming you're hitting headshots, which you absolutely should be, they're pretty good, especially if you can really keep your distance and be taking those shots from a really safe place so that you can just continually shoot them in the head without being killed immediately. They can often be somewhat useful as well, mainly just because you can keep yourself safe in the process and hang back rather than putting yourself right up in the action to deal that damage. And now that we have all that covered, let's start going through some of the best methods I've found currently to be taking out the Juggernaut. Keep in mind I tested far more than just this. I'm just picking out the things that stood out as being quite effective. The first one is the Fin LMG with an adverse barrel and FMJ equipped. With this setup, you're just putting so many rounds downrange as fast as possible, and this is one of the more practical ways of taking out a Juggernaut while also still being an effective player elsewhere and being able to challenge all of the Juggernaut's teammates that are also going to be trying to defend their Juggernaut. So while it's not necessarily the fastest method, it's a very effective method for taking out the Jug. Compared to the other LMGs actually, it's the best one that I've found. Next up, I of course tested the brand new JAK-12 or the AA-12 shotgun because this seems like it would be very good if you can close that distance. And it turns out, if you're using the standard buckshot, so the 20-round mag or the 32-round mag, without FMJ or stopping power, it's going to take you 23 rounds to take down a Juggernaut, which really isn't that bad when you consider just how fast you can shoot this gun. That's pretty decent, but when you throw FMJ on there, that'll cut it down to just 16 shots with the AA-12 up close, which does happen faster than you might expect, and especially if you stay mobile and just keep hip firing and kind of skirting around the enemy, you can be pumping a ton of damage into them. But here's the real big kicker here. If you also use stopping power and FMJ with the AA-12, it kills in 8 shots up close. That's a time to kill value of 1.2 seconds on a Juggernaut. That is absolutely insane. Now, of course, the downside with this is you have to close that gap. You have to get right up close and personal to that Juggernaut, and in some situations, that's just not practical. Other situations, though, it's great. And if you see that opportunity, make sure you load those stopping power rounds in, and you will absolutely obliterate a Juggernaut player. Now, I did also test Dragon's Breath as well as the Frag 12 rounds, or the explosive rounds. Dragon's Breath rounds simply aren't that effective, mainly because you're limited to an 8-round magazine, so you're going to have to reload at some point in there, so you're better off with just standard extended mags with the regular buckshot. However, the Frag 12 rounds, there's something to be said about these ones. With these, it took 18 shots to take out a Juggernaut. Now you might be thinking that's not as good as using the standard buckshot. However, with these explosive rounds, you can do that from a bit of a distance. You don't have to be practically touching the Juggernaut. So there is something to be said for that. These explosive rounds do deal a pretty good amount of damage, and therefore they are pretty good against the Juggernaut. But after that, I wanted to test the SPR, since this is kind of unique. It deals a lot of headshot damage. It's effectively a sniper rifle, so you can really hang back and take those shots at the Juggernaut from relative safety, which is a nice upside. And your rate of fire is way faster than the bolt-action sniper rifles that I tested previously, and it kills in roughly the same number of shots to the head. So again, as long as you're hitting those headshots, without FMJ, it will take you 13 shots to the head to kill, which isn't so bad if you can do that from relative safety. Or if you are using FMJ, it just takes 9 shots to the head to take out a Juggernaut. So on the bigger maps, if you can keep that distance and fire from safety, the SPR is an excellent option for you. Now, another thing I tested, and I just want to show off in the video, even though it's not really that effective, I just wanted to prove that it's not that effective, because I've seen some people say that this is the best way to take out a Juggernaut. This is the Kali sticks, or you could even try the Kodachis. I did do testing with that. In either case, these simply aren't the most effective for taking out a Juggernaut. You would be way better off with an AA-12 if you have to close that distance anyway. And you can see here, it just takes way too many hits, and you don't really deal that much damage with these. So yeah, now let's move into Scorestreaks, and then I'm saving the best setup for last. Of course, I gotta keep you hooked till the end of the video, but I've got a ridiculous setup for taking out Juggernauts. But for the Scorestreaks, I did want to focus on Scorestreaks that were more like lower to mid-level streaks, so they're reasonable to earn several times throughout a match, for instance. And it's just kind of like the best bang for your buck for taking out a Juggernaut. And the highlights for this one, first up, either the Cruise Missile, Precision Airstrike, or Cluster Strike. They're all pretty good at dealing a ton of damage to a Juggernaut. Now, the Cruise Missile isn't going to get a one-hit kill on a Juggernaut. If you hit them directly with that Cruise Missile, it'll take away about half of their health, which is a nice chunk of health to be taking away, especially because with this, you can be super precise with it. You can land it right on target every single time, as long as there's not overhead cover. Whereas with the Cluster Strike, this one can deal a lot of damage if that Juggernaut is dumb and just stands still in the explosive radius of that, which they generally aren't going to be. And this is why I'd say the Cluster Strike is a bit less effective on average. But then we have the Precision Airstrike, which does have the ability to take out a Juggernaut by itself from a single streak. However, once again, if the Juggernaut's moving and they manage to get a little bit outside of the range of that airstrike, then you'll end up either not dealing any damage to them, or you'll only deal a bit of damage to them. So out of the three, the Cruise Missile is just the most consistent, even though it doesn't do as much damage overall. Now, on top of this, we have the Wheelson, which is amazing at taking out Juggernauts, and not necessarily with the cannon. It's more so if you run a Juggernaut over with the Wheelson, you can take a ton of their health away, and sometimes you can just run them down pretty much instantly and kill them. So especially if you're combining that with the cannon, because that is also going to be dealing some damage to them, you can really take them out quickly with the Wheelson, as long as you don't give them too much time to shoot back at you. But finally, for really effective mid to lower end streaks, the Sentry Gun is surprisingly good, especially for this mode where you know that Juggernaut has to come toward your spawn. You have that time to set up a defensive perimeter, sort of. And if you can get a Sentry Gun on a Juggernaut, you can see that it's really taking his health away quite quickly here, and especially if you are also shooting that Juggernaut at the same time, it's an incredibly effective way for taking them out for this particular mode. And now it's finally time to get into the best method that I've personally found for taking out a Juggernaut, and the nice thing about this is you don't have to earn a score streak. This is just a regular loadout that you can create. This is actually the EBR-14. This gun doesn't really get a lot of love. It doesn't really stand out in any areas in most game modes, but in this particular game mode, you might be surprised to find that the EBR might actually be the best gun in the mode. And the simple reason for this is with the EBR-14, with no attachments, it takes 15 rounds to the head to kill a Juggernaut, which is amazing. That's very, very good. You can do that in less than a magazine if you put a 15 or 20 round magazine on there, so you don't even need to get a reload in, and it's pretty easy to land headshots with this. However, with FMJ, you cut that down to just 10 bullets to the head within the maximum damage range of this EBR-14 to take down a Juggernaut. And better yet, if you combine FMJ and stopping power on the EBR-14, it's just 8 shots to the head and the Juggernaut is gone. Assuming you do that while hitting the fire rate cap with EBR-14, you will kill a Juggernaut in 1.4 seconds, which is incredibly fast for killing a Juggernaut. It's technically a little slower than that AA-12 setup I showed earlier. However, it's way more versatile than an AA-12 because you can do this from a pretty decent distance away while still being in that maximum damage range for the EBR. And therefore with this, not only do you still get a ridiculously fast time to kill, you can do it from a bit of a range as well. So if I were designing the perfect class setup right now to take out Juggernauts consistently, this is pretty much it. I'd be using an EBR, making sure that I'm using that 20 round extended mag and FMJ, and then everything else is completely optional. Then I'd be using it overkilled with the AA-12 with either the 20 or 32 round magazine on there, and again, FMJ, everything else is optional. And then I'd also be using stopping power as my field upgrade, and then in any situation where I feel like I could close that distance, I'd be loading those stopping power rounds into my shotgun. Whereas if I'm in a situation where I don't feel like I can close that distance, I'll load those rounds into my EBR. Now on top of that, I'd also recommend using a Molotov, and the reason for this is in this mode, the more friendly players that group around a Juggernaut, the faster that Juggernaut will be able to move. So by throwing a Molotov at the Juggernaut, not only are you going to be dealing some damage to the Juggernaut, you're also going to be forcing those enemy players away from the Juggernaut, which therefore slows their movement down as they're approaching you. For that same reason, using a gas grenade might be a great idea as well. Hit that Juggernaut with a gas grenade, it'll force his teammates away from him, slow him down, and allow you to get some more shots off on him. And with that, that's pretty much it. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. I'd like to know in the comment section below. First up, what do you guys think of this new Onslaughter mode? And second, what are your thoughts on some of these strategies for taking a Juggernaut out very quickly? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.